Hello and welcome back to the After Dinner Leadership Podcast. Today we're going to talk about a topic which I've come across recently, a word that I've come across recently called antifragile. I'd not heard of this phrase before and I love it. I think its application can apply to us as leaders within our families and also leaders of teams. And I first came across it as I'm reading this book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And the subtext, how the great rewiring of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness. So the context of the book is not quite where I'm going, but certainly I think it's a fantastic read. Highly recommend it. If you are a parent and haven't read this, I strongly recommend that you do, particularly as you've got children in the teenage years or those that are approaching it, and this decision about, do we let them have a phone or not? And how an iPhone is used or any smartphone is used. Jonathan Haidt is arguing that we have created phone-based childhood rather than play-based childhoods. And there is a challenge with that. Anyway, I want to focus in on this idea of antifragility. And he's coined the phrase used by a guy called Nassim Taleb in 2012. He wrote a book called Antifragile, Things That Gain from Disorder. And I like the comparison he uses. So a fragile thing would be something like a wine glass. And if you push it over, it falls on the floor, it's going to break. And that type of item can't stand a challenge. It needs to be protected, and we protect fragile things. The other end of the spectrum would be a plastic cup. You knock it off the counter, falls on the floor, it doesn't do any real damage. But it also doesn't get better. It can withstand the shock, but it doesn't get better by the fall. Then you've got anti-fragile things. And these, if I read from the book here, Taleb coined the word anti-fragile to describe things that actually need to get knocked over now and then in order to become strong. I use the word things, but there are very few inanimate objects that are anti-fragile. Rather, antifragility is a common property of complex systems that were designed to function in a world that is unpredictable. So you've got things like the immune system as an example. And Jonathan Haidt would also argue humans, children, are anti-fragile. So we've got this complex, unpredictable system, and like the immune system that we've got to work with. And then how do you ensure that that immune system actually builds strength and resilience to withstand later threats of disease, etc. That's how it works. It gets knocked over and it comes back stronger in most healthy people. And then we've got the psychological immune system, which is a big part to that as well. And I guess that's the transition then into this idea of thinking about our teams. Are they fragile teams or are they anti-fragile teams? We can think about our children, but also let's think about our teams. So a fragile team, we've got a team that can't withstand the lows of a cycle, the challenges of an angry client, or the announcement of a budget cut, or a big change in the organization. And as leaders, we perhaps could be overprotective of those teams, just the same way we might be overprotective of our children. And so we stop them, for example, going out to play in the street or out in the garden or outside at all, because without parental supervision, because we're scared they might get kidnapped or worse, and we then wrap them up in cotton wool. In a similar way, we could do the same things with our team. We try to smooth out every bump for our team. We will take the call for the angry client, and they don't have to face up to that themselves. But in the process of doing that, we're actually creating a dependency, and also we're restricting their ability to grow into stronger corporate citizens. And when a big crisis comes, then the team struggles because they haven't learned and got that muscle memory, that ability necessarily to be resilient in those crisis moments. And he also talked about the modes in which our children can go. They're going to defend mode or discover mode. And I really like this idea of that if we are overprotective, what we can create in our teams is a defensive mode where they're not able to withstand criticism, receive feedback. They go into full defensive mode. and they're not in to discover. They're not interested in being curious anymore, or looking out at other opportunities that they could learn from. So in creating an anti-fragile team, we might do things to intentionally simulate failure. For example, we're encouraging mistakes in some respects so that we can learn from those, and that we're really trying to have this discovery mode on, so that when we get hurt or things don't go the way that we planned, we can recover quickly and learn from those mistakes, and take those in as really good data points that will inform the next decisions. I think back over the last couple of weeks, for example, there was a piece of work that we were really excited about winning with a client, and all the signs were pretty strong that was coming our way. And then we got that call, the dreaded call, where I'm grateful for their honesty, but also wasn't entirely pleased to receive the news that piece of business was going to go elsewhere. And I've had that happen many times, of course. I always prefer the call that says that you've won the business. It's a really nice thing, but there's great learning to be had in that difficult message, receiving that difficult message that we haven't won that business. If we can stay in that defensive mode if I can stay in that discovery mode, there's things to learn. If we get into the defensive mode, we'll shut down and potentially start blaming and criticizing, thinking about why have they gone with somebody else. But if we can focus on the discovery mode, we can ask questions and reflect on what we're going to learn from that, what's going to help us to get even stronger as we go into other pieces of business that we're pitching. Look at the quality and really challenge the quality of what we're producing, if we use that example, and think about the quality and refinements of the actual pitch process itself. Now, I help and have been helping people to pitch for new business. So I know the structures of it, but obviously when you're faced with a situation where you haven't won that yourself, it's a really good opportunity to reflect and to really examine what we can do to get stronger. So a few questions that have come to mind, and perhaps in advance of me asking these, I'd like you to think about a setback that you've had recently, and I'll pose these questions to you, just like I posed them to myself. So first question, the simple version of it is, why did that hurt? What was it about that thing really that hurt? Now, clearly there's some bruised egos perhaps, and that could be the lesson. But getting beyond that, what was it about this that you cared so much about, or what was it about it that really stings around this? And maybe there's some lessons there in the answer to that question that could help us to be stronger. Is there something I could do to fortify that front, so that I'm let's say less exposed in the next situation that arises? Talking about exposed, next question: what area did this expose that needs my attention? If we take my pitch example, it could be actually the quality of the argumentation wasn't strong enough. Maybe there was some work that needed to be done to make that even more specific for the client. Maybe there's an opportunity to check in earlier than the decision point to establish if everything was still tracking the way that we thought it was. What did it expose in our processes that really needs more focus, more attention to it? Third question: how could I use this to get stronger? Well, that's been inferred throughout everything I've said, but let's face down on that question in some detail. What could we do? What could I do to use this situation to help us to be stronger? Did we do an after action review after that? And was it thorough? Did we have a bit of hubris or a bit of ego, said, no, we don't have to do that because it was a great meeting, or it was a great proposal, it's not good, it doesn't need any further assessment? Well, clearly there could be opportunities to learn from the good stuff, but also to really identify where that was weak or weaker, and that we could make it stronger going into the next phase. So these questions are not there to add complication, but just to ensure that we're going through that genuine process of discovery that will help us as a team to be anti-fragile rather than fragile, that we're facing up to the realities of the hurt, and we're also trying to ensure that we learn something from this that we can take with us into the next phase. Anyone that's involved in exercise, you'll know that in order to make the muscle stronger, it also has to tear a little, and we get those aches and pains after a workout, after a longer run than we might normally do. It's taking us into that stretch zone, and that's where the muscle's going to grow. That's where the muscle's going to grow stronger. So I encourage you, first off, to read the book, The Anxious Generation, particularly if you're a parent. Please read it. Highly recommend it. And for you that are leading or going into leadership, to think about how you are ensuring that you are gaining strength from setbacks rather than it knocking the wind out of yourselves. We're going into, when we hit that wall, we're also learning how we can approach it stronger the next time, maybe to break through it into the next phase of our growth as a human, as a leader. I trust some of that makes sense to you, and I really love this term, antifragile. You're probably going to hear me using that again sometime on these episodes, and I wish you the very best of success with your teams as you discover new strengths, new stretch areas that will help you to grow. And please listen again. We've got lots of guests coming in the following weeks, and we look forward to welcoming you back as we explore different aspects of leadership and the lessons that they've learned or wish they would have learned earlier in their careers. Wishing you well. See you again soon. Bye.